كريم، ازيك؟ Good to see you, man.
هاي عمر، ايه الاخبار؟ good to see you too.
كله تمام. انت عندك الاخبار كلها الاسبوع ده بالذات. كل مره بنتقابل you reach like a new milestone and I am very happy to be talking to you بالذات today. اول مره اتقابلنا في 2018 كنت لسه بادئ يوداوي and you
Yes.
already had a couple of accounts with insurance companies and you were pushing and bootstrapping. وبعد كده اخر مره اتقابلنا في my memory serves me كان اخر 2019 and you had just raised the Series A. And today we're talking and you just closed your Series B. So first of all, congratulations. You've joined the ranks of very few companies, like I say, that in the whole continent, I think, especially in health tech, that make it to Series B. How does that feel for you, Laud?
Well, it's actually it's nice for the first 5 seconds, and then you're reminded that you actually have to get back to work and hopefully look or start working towards the next milestone. So we've come a long way, and obviously very happy about this milestone, but طبعا very excited about what's coming next. And so yeah, back in game mode again.
Yeah. Well, Karim, tell us a little bit about your background and ازاي وصلت ليوداوي and tell us about Yodawy's story so far.
Sure. I had so I'm a computer scientist by education. I started out my career thinking I'm going to become an engineer for the rest of my life. That lasted for about 6 months before I joined a management consulting firm. I joined Booz & Company in Munich, spent there a few years, and then moved to Dubai as well. And around 2016, 2017, I started to kind of So yeah, around 2016, 2017, I left my job and came back to Egypt. I really just wanted to kind of explore what is possible. I was very excited about the opportunities that would be available. I joined the family business, kind of initially working on software development for hospitals. We rolled out kind of a mini HIS that was mostly being deployed in public sector hospitals, but also a lot of polyclinics and kind of private sector hospitals and general specific departments and so on. And this was really kind of my first encounter with the Egyptian healthcare market. And it was a moment of obviously a bit of shock. At the same time, you realize kind of the magnitude of the opportunity that's there. But more importantly, you start to understand what can possibly become a meaningful driver for change. And really kind of my conclusion from this period, short as it was that the change would have to come from the consumer side and from the payer side in general, if the market was going to change. That the provider side would probably be, let's say, the lowest accelerator for change in general, just given how the ecosystem is set up and the kind of how fragmented it is in general, and kind of the relationship between the doctors and the institutions. Just felt it's too difficult of a starting point in general. And I was always kind of quite interested in the concept of electronic prescriptions in general. Just felt it would be a kind of a great experience for someone who's actually kind of who needs to take his medications or remember. And so really, this is where the kind of the initial spark came for the idea of Yodawy. I had also spent the kind of previous 15 years outside of the country, and so kind of every time I wanted to order medications for myself, or at the time kind of my newborn son, it just felt a little bit tedious. I hated the paper. I hated the ordering process, kind of searching for items that were of limited availability. I had gotten completely used to using my insurance and own transactions. So it felt like the experience is just off in general. It's just all the kind of the right components were not there. And that's kind of really where we started to understand where the real gaps are and why the experience is actually the way it is. And I was really interested in the American PBM model, or pharmacy benefits managers model, and how this evolved from the early 2000s in the US into what is there today. And so this is kind of how the idea of Yodawy initially came. And we were very conscious, obviously, that insurance is still in its early days. And so whatever viable business you'd be able to create in this context would have to cater to the out-of-pocket spenders or the private spenders. And so this is how Yodawy came to life. We said, okay, we needed to answer a few questions. Well, the first one was, are people willing to order medications online, right? That's kind of because if they're not, nothing else makes sense. And we came up with a very simple MVP in 2018. At the time, a lot of people were still kind of doing other things on the side or were still in their jobs. I myself, at the time, was even taking consulting projects, was traveling to Dubai kind of once per week. It was quite hectic. And around 2000, let's say Q3 2018, we decided, okay, this is actually worth it. We saw decent traction in the MVP that we had created, and we decided to kind of create a company out of that. And we did. And really, a few months later, we started to approach payers. So despite the fact that we had only kind of a private ordering platform only, we were very, very conscious of the model from day zero. And so we really kind of went to, at the time, had a very, very kind of powerful innovation mandate and worked with us on creating the first pilot of an online-based medication ordering where you are allowed to use your insurance card, and the entire process is basically managed by the back office, and we spare the end consumer or member the pain of the process end to end. And one thing led to another, and we landed our seed or Series A investment in end of 2019. We landed $1 million from Algebra and C Ventures. And this allowed us to actually then really kind of start to scale the business. And from there on, really, we went on to work with all payers. We developed into a full-fledged medication ordering platform that is serving or has more than 2 million customers at this stage. We have integrated with the majority of payers in the market, whether they are local HMOs or kind of your international payers or TPAs. We went on to develop our own approval engine that we were able to kind of offer our partners, our payers, to help accelerate the process as well, but also kind of as a pure B2B service. And finally, and after a lot of hard work, we landed our Series B of $7.5 million from MEVP, Global Ventures, and Algebra, and some kind of smaller investors as well. So that's kind of the story in a nutshell.
It's a fascinating story, and one that I think a lot of entrepreneurs can learn from. There's so much that we can go into, how you've been able to automate the business, what the PBM model looks like, and I'll actually come back to that. But first, I think what everyone is wondering is, how do you raise a Series B in the Middle East, right? Because that's not a milestone that a lot of people hit. So يعني قول لنا شوية عن المشاكل اللي واجهتك, and how you've been able to overcome them in terms of, what's the investment landscape like right now, and what should other entrepreneurs do in terms of approaching investors, but also in terms of like what you're doing inside your own walls. Like, what do you think was attractive or allowed you to get to that milestone?
Sure. I think maybe the most important advice is start early, right? The process takes time, and even kind of just to initiate, even just getting a term sheet is something that takes time. And so obviously there's a lot of literature around how you should structure your materials and all of this. But I think the name of the game here is simplicity. How you can convey really the proposition of your company in the simplest possible form, which again, as we discussed earlier, is very tough when it comes to healthcare. Whenever it comes to healthcare, everything is complicated. So that's really kind of start early and just keep it simple, I would say. It's ultimately a law of large numbers, right? So you have to approach a lot of people in order to end up with a few interested and kind of take the process forward. In my case, I was very lucky to kind of to interact with MEVP and Global Ventures from an early stage, and they're both kind of excellent investors with kind of great leadership and kind of the right institutional framework and support to kind of get the process going. So I can't say that kind of the initial start was tough for us, where we kind of had great chemistry and saw eye to eye from a relatively early stage. Apart from this, I think it's just a process where you have to be very kind of systematic about it. You have to be organized. You have to enter the process relatively kind of ready on a material level, on a pitch level, on kind of answering the tough questions that people will probe into. And it's a process that takes stamina. So it's a lot of hard work, and it is a full-time job. It's not something to be taken lightly as a side activity.
And speaking of things that take stamina, you mentioned you've onboarded 1,000 small mom and pop pharmacies now across the country. So yes. Tell me about the resistance and what it took to like actually get that. Was it an easy sell, or did you face a lot of uptake resistance?
I think it's a question of timing. If you ask me, you have to. Look, it's always a chicken or the egg with the supply and demand balancing, right? If you go get a lot of pharmacies too early in the game, you end up with a lot of dissatisfied pharmacies who are not getting enough orders. And at the same time, so it's a balancing act, and that's kind of the key here. And so being able to onboard them at the right time, this is really kind of what mattered here. I can't say that there was a lot of resistance, but there was also a lot of flexibility from our side on how to engage them. So, and this is maybe a lesson learned for a lot of people who are starting or doing a business that has a supply side, is you can only start to enforce certain processes once you've kind of scaled up the business. And that was key in how we approach this. We were very practical at the beginning. So it's okay, you don't want to use our screens or portals to receive orders, we just give you a code, don't worry about it. And then in time, once you kind of amass a bit of scale, you could start to kind of convey or convince them to transition to the processes that will kind of relieve you from a lot of manual work.
And when it comes to manual processes too, you seem like you've been able to automate a lot of the process, right? It was one of your key focus areas. Why was that important to you, and what has it enabled you to do?
I think more and more we identify ourselves as a very as a process company, if I may put it this way, and to be able to operationally process these volumes of orders and distribute them correctly to pharmacies and manage the quality of the fulfillment itself is a process that you can do manually maybe at the beginning, but really as you kind of start to scale, it's a real bottleneck. And so really what we focused on is automating the kind of fulfillment processes, the routing processes, but more importantly, automating the approval processes for our payers as well, since there is a dependency that the insurance company has to approve the transaction in order for the kind of the end consumer to get the insurance benefits or kind of the discounts, if I may put it this way.
Yeah, and that might be a good place to elaborate a little bit about the PBM model and why you chose insurance companies.
Sure. Look, we believe in a world where health insurance we really believe in a world where health insurance is the default, and so kind of as part of enabling this world for us, it's about enabling the payers to absorb a much bigger capacity to be able to cope with the growth in health insurance that's expected over the next 5 years. For us, the existing process infrastructure and the kind of link between medical providers and insurance companies that was in place at the time or is in place now did not really facilitate the growth that is expected in the next phase. And for us to be able to be part of the enabling ecosystem that allows medical providers to get approvals faster, spare people the kind of the painful details of an insurance approval process, and for insurance companies to be able to process or even yet better automate much more approvals is kind of a critical component of this new world that would be transitioning to. And so for us, this is really kind of it was a very strategic product to be working on, and one that is relevant, we believe, for every payer in the market.
You've done a lot of really interesting strategic plays, Karim, over the past year. And one last thing I want to ask you about is using the HL7 standard FHIR. When we speak of ecosystems and being able to connect all these pieces of the puzzle together, why did you choose that? And what kind of adoption do you think other Egyptian players, such as these really big corporate players, would have for it?
Sure. I spent around a year and a half kind of before Yodawy working on database structures for medical records in general. And so it drove me and pretty much everyone crazy, kind of what the best structure would be to manage all of this highly unstructured data, let me put it this way. Right, so it's really the FHIR standard for us is a revolution, to be honest. It's first of all, it gave us a beautiful way to structure the medical data in a standardized way. And for any kind of digital player in this context, most of the time you don't really have one single application, right? It's you need to already kind of for your own company build a mini exchange that kind of transfers data successfully between different applications and standardize the way medical data is handled and stored. And so for us, obviously there was a bit of overhead in terms of adopting FHIR at the beginning. There's a lot of data migration that has to happen and so on. But it's completely worth it, because now every new kind of feature or application that we roll out has already kind of these pre-developed access points with a standardized way of handling the data. It's already kind of, it's a culture you even develop within your dev and data science team, right? So everyone speaks the same language. We recently did an integration, actually multiple integrations, whether on the payer side or the provider side. And for us to have kind of a playbook already for how we're going to be accessing the data, what structure we require, and so on, helped tremendously. That is not to say there are no localizations or optimizations around FHIR. It is generic enough for you to still handle kind of your requirements. And for any software architect or data architect, I think there is still a bit of effort to be made as to what you need to store in FHIR versus store in your kind of local services. So there is still quite a bit of work around it, but it's once you get there, it's completely worth it. I think in terms of adoption in the ecosystem in general, I feel like the recent FHIR standard has to a large extent commoditized this. So HL7 previously was a little bit more complicated, but now with FHIR, with the quality of documentation that's available, I think whoever really kind of decides to get into this can do that comfortably.